From WNPR, I'm John Dankosky, and this is The Wheelhouse.
Sources tell CNN the NSA document was allegedly leaked to The Intercept by this 25-year-old government contractor with top-secret security clearance, Reality Lee Winner.
Is Jeff Sessions' job safe? I know that's been asked repeatedly at these press conferences. And they always say, refer it to the president.
It's not clear, right?
Terror in London, starting with a van careening into crowds of people on the city's iconic London Bridge.
Are President Trump's tweets considered official White House statements?
Well, the president is the president of the United States, so they're considered official statements by the president of the United States.
President Trump has just tweeted this morning he'll nominate former Justice Department official Christopher Wray as the next FBI director. In his tweet, Trump says details will follow.
Well, we'll be digging into some details on a lot of other stuff in the news this week. You can join our conversation, 860-275-7266. Comment on our website, wnpr.org/The Wheelhouse. You can also find us on Facebook and Twitter at WNPR Wheelhouse. I will tell you that tomorrow we'll be having live coverage throughout the course of the morning and early afternoon of James Comey, a former FBI director, testifying on Capitol Hill. I'm joined today by Colin McEnroe. He's the host of the Colin McEnroe Show on WNPR. Howdy, Colin.
Good morning, Mr. Dankosky.
Kevin Rennie's here. Kevin's a lawyer, but he's also a Hartford Courant columnist, and he blogs about all things about state government at dailyructions.com. Hello there, Kevin.
Good morning, John.
And Christine Stewart is here. She's editor-in-chief at ctnewsjunkie.com. Hello there, Christine.
Hello, John.
Well, look, it's the end of the legislative session, which is always a time for some great celebration. I say that facetiously to Christine, who had about 2 hours sleep, and Kevin, who came in a foul mood over all this stuff. And I was going to start with sort of where we are right now, but let's actually start here with the reality of this. Kevin, you said you're not in a great mood today. You are a former legislator. What's it like at the end of a legislative session when you're trying to get a whole bunch of stuff done, you've started late, maybe you've got a big budget problem to solve, but nobody's working together? I mean, what's it like down there?
It can be very mysterious because motivations aren't always clear, and often the public forgets this, is that as many people who are working to get something done, there are just as many working to stop things, and they're watching the clock very carefully, and they know if they can get people to talk, that they increase their chances of beating something, and so people's motives often become kind of murky.
Murky motives, and also that
also,
problem
people are tired. People are very tired.
Well, and it's something that we always complain about. I mean, people working well into the night, past the hours that most normal people work. Christine?
So what's interesting at the end of the legislative session, this happens every legislative session, that something completely unrelated gets tied to something else.
Yes.
And you've got to figure out what those two things are. And I feel like this year it was a mixed martial arts bill and the casino deal. So in order to bring the casino deal up in the House, we had to get mixed martial arts passed in the Senate.
And the other part of this is, I think you'll both agree with me, that in the bubble that they're in, the sleep-deprived and somewhat alcohol-saturated bubble that they wind up in up there, they don't know at a certain point that this is insane. And so people will come up to you and say something completely – somebody will come up to you and say, I think I can get the early childhood education office salvaged if we allow people to hunt deer with blowguns on Sundays or something. And you look at them and say, you just said a crazy thing, right? Like those two things don't have anything to do with each other. So that's like a crazy thing. But it's not a crazy thing. Not at this point. Not
at this point. But at the same time, this year is completely different. So this year, basically because of the margins, because Republicans and Democrats, the Democratic majority has shrunk and they're even in the Senate, there isn't a lot of actual business happening. And so there isn't a lot that's getting done. And the lobbyists for the first time are out in the hallway, with their hands up. Nobody knows what's going on from 1 minute to the next because it's unpredictable and it all has to be brokered and it can fall apart at the drop of a hat.
So that sounds a little bit different, Kevin.
Well, this is the part that baffles me a little bit. And it is that usually, because the budget is kind of late in the session, that all sorts of bills are held up pending the passage of the budget. But there's no budget. Mm-hmm. So why are they holding up all these bills until the end? Because I think they know no other way of life. And they like to dangle them out there and try to make deals. And They kept saying they were one vote away from tolls. God knows what extra price we would have paid for tolls, in addition to bonding that was being dangled in front of legislators. And it's been true with a lot of other bills. It has been very, very transactional.
Well, I think there's another part of this too, which is that first of all, I mean, in the past, the Democratic Party has had pretty overwhelming advantages in each chamber. And so there would be other kinds of feuds. Christine, I'm sure you remember many, final session nights when Don Williams, the leader of the Senate, was feuding with Brendan Starkey, the leader of the House. They're both from the same party, but they would just decide, oh, well, you Senate people look down on us. Here's what we're going to do. And it's like this insane thing that really kind of getting in their own way. Well, now they don't have to make up things like that because they actually really have some political issues that they have to solve, political issues that you have to be a very skilled political leader to solve. If you've got essentially a tie in the Senate and a pretty narrow margin in the House, suddenly you need a different set of skills, and it's much harder to get. I mean, Kevin, one possible reason that some of these things are aren't getting passed or even called is because Ara Simowitz, the leader of the House, doesn't know how to get them through. He doesn't have a solid enough
They're having
caucus.
a very hard time counting votes.
Well, and so this session, unlike any other session, issues have come up to be debated, and then they're tabled and set aside because they know they don't have the votes.
Mm-hmm.
But for some reason, they feel that they should be airing these issues and debating them for hours and hours.
So we had a big debate about legal marijuana, right? And
Yes.
that got tabled afterward. And this is, as we've talked about before, this is a pretty big issue. It has potentially a revenue-generating source, but I think we all agree that probably the worst possible way to legalize marijuana in the state is to do it haphazardly in the middle of the night. So they had a big debate and then just put it aside. So is it dead now?
So it's not exactly dead. So the reason that the speaker, Joe Arasimowicz, said that they were having debates on some of these issues, like marijuana, like tolls, was because it'll make them feel better if they have to shove them in the budget and make everybody vote for a budget.
It's if
Because we've aired it, we've talked about it, so it's okay. We're good.
I just want to make sure I understand.
Yes.
He. I mean, you're paraphrasing, but he actually said that.
Yes, he
that's
actually
not
said
an
this.
inference
Yes.
you're
No,
making,
it's not.
or an assumption you're making. He actually basically said, "Yeah, we want to talk about it in case it gets jammed in the budget."
Yes.
Well, and this is why we now approach the maximum hour of danger because there's no budget. They're going into a special session, and the normal checks and balances within the legislature are all wiped away, and they can do many very bad, really anti-democratic things when they put together a budget under these conditions.
Well, the
But they
rules
always
don't apply.
They always do that. They put stuff in the implementers that hasn't
Not
even
like
had public
this.
hearings. Well,
Not
yeah,
like
maybe
this.
not like this, but I mean, there haven't really been checks and
and
balances.
also but they're desperate also at the moment. I mean,
Let's stop and actually talk about the desperation. So on the budget, we're not going to get any sort of a budget deal here in the regular session. There's a special session already set. Do we have a date for the special session? Do we know when the special session is going to be, Christine?
There is no date for special session. The Senate last night passed a call to special session. So they will be calling themselves back in. The House has to pass that at some point today.
It'll start at
so
it'll
this
start
is-
at 12:01.
Right? Yeah, and they could call themselves immediately back in.
So
would be
what's been
unwise.
happening is that they're cramming for a big final that is supposed to happen tonight, but they've already moved the test, and they don't know when the test is going to be. So at some point, they're going to actually have to deal with the budget. Why are we moving the problem of the budget out of the regular session into a special session? Is
John,
it just
could I
'cause-
answer? When you have ADHD, you often get extra time.
Yeah.
Because they can't get it done. They don't have the ability to get it done. They want to get it done before June 30th. At the same time, they're not meeting. The sides, the various caucuses are not meeting to discuss the budget.
There's no
even.
Democratic budget. They have not.
It was an
presented
Excel
a budget.
spreadsheet. It was one page.
I just want to understand, when you say they can't get it done, like, let's just sort of pull that apart. They've had this entire session, and now they have a new session that they're going to call sometime before June 30th, which seems totally random to me, but I don't know. Maybe there's a reason why it has to be June 30th.
Well, because
the end
the
of the
fiscal
fiscal
year
year.
begins July 1st.
But do they actually have to have a budget by
Yes.
July 1st?
Well, they have to have something.
yeah.
Otherwise, so if they don't have a budget before July 1st, what happens is that Malloy has executive authority, and he will use that executive authority to fund the budget.
We've
So the
done
last
this
time this
before.
happened
And we've
was
done that before.
Well,
2009,
that's exactly right,
2003, 1991.
In 2003, it was when it was in the hands of John Rowland. It was a disaster. It was a disaster. I mean, it's you don't really want to give the governor this
Right,
this
and the
kind of
lawmakers
power.
don't want to get
They
to
don't
that
want to
point.
get this
It
kind
was
of
a
power.
disaster in the hands of John Rowland. I'm surprised to hear you say that. That's shocking to me. Okay, so we don't have a budget deal now. We hope to have a budget deal in a couple weeks. But Christine, how are we going to get close to this? Given the political dynamics right now, given everything that we've just not gotten done during this regular session, how do we actually get to that point? What needs to
They're
happen?
not going to have any Republican votes for this, so they're just going to have to beat their members over the head and make them vote for it. And, maybe
Whatever it
means
is, we don't know what it is.
keeping them there. Yeah, who knows? We don't even know what's in it yet.
Okay, so
I think one thing that we need to say about this,
Sure.
and I mean, Christine, you have a much better grasp on this than I do, so I don't want to be mansplaining this. But I really do think that one very fundamental relationship has become incredibly dysfunctional, and that is the relationship between Joe Arasimowicz, the Speaker, and Themis Claridis, the Minority Leader, where, I mean, the great thing about it, in a way that was just suggested a few seconds ago, is they're like on sodium pentothal right now. They're actually like saying stuff that's true that nobody ever says. And so, I mean, recently Themis Claridis said, well, yeah, isn't everybody always just trying to get as many seats as they can? Isn't that like what this this is all about? Which may or may not be true, but you're really not supposed to say that in the hallway to reporters. And Themis Claridis, who I, by the way, really like, and I actually think, has a lot of potential to be a very interesting politician in this state. But she also has this kind of, warrior princess side that comes out. And right now she's kind of in that mode, and it's kind of, she's basically saying, I'm going to make things as tough for the Democrats as possible. And she talked about tolls, which I know Kevin doesn't like, but she said, we're not going to leave any fingerprints on the murder weapon, meaning that, the Democrats would be murdered in 2018 if they passed tolls. And, I just feel like these two people who right now probably do need to cooperate in order to get a budget out are doing the opposite and playing it out as this kind of tableau vivant of dysfunction. It's like they're almost enjoying the attention that they're getting for how poorly they're interacting.
Quick thoughts, Christine and Kevin?
No, I was just thinking about the Jaws references yesterday during the toll debate.
We have to talk about those.
Yeah, please.
So Tony Guerrera, who is the proponent of tolls, said that he feels like, he's like Chief Brody warning the first selectman of Amity to close the beaches for the 4th of July holiday because he knows this thing is out there. And so, this thing is this, the crumbling concrete of Connecticut's highways that are going to come down because we don't have any money to pay for them.
Well, let's actually hear a little bit from Tony Guerrera.
It needs to be done. And every day that we wait, it's going to be on our backs. I don't want to wait any longer. And I know this is difficult, but Jesus, guys, we got elected to make some tough decisions here.
We also heard from Representative Devin Carney, a Republican ranking member on the committee, who says he doesn't believe it's a good way to actually raise money for the state.
All this bill will do is lead to more funds coming out of hardworking people's pockets. Because this state can't function. They can't spend their money right, and they just want more and more and more from the residents of this state. 65% of this will come from the residents of this state at least.
Okay, so that's a little bit from the argument around tolls. It seems as though this plan to put tolls on the highways, Kevin, has stalled out at least for now, but who knows what's going to happen?
Well, who knows? But I want to go back to something that Colin said. Something completely wrong that he said.
Oh, no.
Uh-oh.
And it is the problem here. Well, first of all, Themis Claridis is a terrible leader. And, she has not done a very good job. She should be picking off Democratic votes. He's got 79. Joe Arasimowicz has 79 votes. She should be trying to create a broader coalition in order to promote the ideas that people put in her head. And then she parrots with cliches day after day after day. That's what they should be doing. But she's hopeless at that.
But they haven't had to do that in such a long time.
Well,
they
I
forgot
know.
how to do that.
You don't forget how to do it. At this, you're in that office, you do it. You do it. You get out there and you figure out how to make some alliances that go beyond your 72 members. She's had plenty of time to do it.
But she's playing a different kind of game,
I mean,
which is
if
to
she
be,
just
yeah.
thought about it when
Right.
she was sitting on her flights to and from Florida, she could sort it out then.
She's playing a very different game right now, which
And
is
now
to
she's playing a very dangerous
to run them into a cliff and then pick up the debris in 2018. I mean, what you're talking about, you have to be able to go to Democrats and say, yeah, come over with me and we can kind of get this done with you being this kind of crescent
And it'll be our
minority.
kind of plan.
Right, exactly. But right now, the message she's sending to the Democratic caucus is, I intend to be the majority party after 2018. So you're unlikely, if you're a Democrat, to cooperate with the person whose stated goal is to drive you into the minority.
I guess the question a lot of people would have is, so in 2018, what remnants of the state would be available for a Republican majority to govern? If we aren't able to solve
Shelton.
a looming budget crisis, if we're not able to actually find some way to solve transportation problems that we have. I mean, what exactly, Colin, are we looking for the Republicans who want to have this kind of nuclear option, blow things up and take over the state of disaster in 2018? What do they have left to govern? That's the part I don't understand.
Well, you've heard me say in the past that one of the great ironies of politics and political success in Connecticut is that it often involves someone climbing his or her way to the top of a dunghill and then getting up there and forgetting exactly what kind of material they were climbing through at the beginning. And yeah, you're right that playing brinksmanship kinds of games right now is a risky proposition. I don't think any of us knows what kind of risky proposition it is because, in fact, the financial crisis is maybe more dire than it's ever been before. And I don't really, I mean, is it going to be like Cormac McCarthy's The Road, I mean.
Wow, that's dark.
Okay, so we can sort of start there and work up. Okay, it's going to be better than The Road.
I hope so.
Cannibalism.
But before we get too far away from this, Christine, are we on this road, whatever the road looks like, are we going to have overhead gantries taking tolls? Are we going to actually have some sort of a toll plan?
I don't see how the state doesn't get there. I don't know if it's going to be this year. I don't know if it's going to be next year. I agree with Representative Guerrera. We're going to get there because fuel efficiency has increased and there needs to be, no one's going to increase the gas tax and there needs to be some way to pay for this money. And we might have a lockbox if voters agree to vote for it in 2018. So maybe that's some sort of guarantee, even though it's a leaky lockbox.
Well, yes. Yeah. So the House voted
Which
on a
we don't have
lockbox.
yet.
The Senate has to approve a lockbox, right? And then it would go to a vote.
In 2018.
Yes,
in 2018.
In 2018,
But
yes.
again, we'd be passing, as Kevin said, essentially a constitutional amendment to create a transportation lockbox. We've got a lot of things that we say that we have, but we don't have. Kevin, just very quickly, you hate tolls.
Well, I think that we already have a very high gas tax. Connecticut is not undertaxed. It's not. And then we're putting an extra burden on people. If you saw the map that I posted on my blog,
I did.
That's a lot of tolls.
It's potentially a lot of tolls in that way. The only issue is that we don't collect any sort of taxes or fees from people who drive through our state. And for better or worse, Connecticut is a pass-through state. We're not the state that people go to for vacation like Maine. We're not the place.
I thought we were. I thought we had thriving
We're not the place that
tourism
people
here.
go to for work like Boston. We have people going back and forth through Boston and New York. And even if most of the tolls do end up coming from Connecticut residents, conservatively, something like 35 or 40% are coming from outside. We're gaining money from outside.
You think on routes 2, 9, 8, 11, you think those are...
But they're never going to put tolls on 2, 9, 8, and 11.
Yes, that is potentially part of the plan.
It was part of the plan that was studied, but they said that they would only be putting them on the busiest highways, and I don't think that those are there yet.
I mean, look, the part of the problem is, as I think John's kind of hinting at, we're essentially in the New England / New York area that we're in, subsidizing everybody else's governments by going through their tolls and not having tolls. And I realize that's a sort of a slightly kind of dog in the manger attitude about both public policy and fundraising. But it's also true, right, that ultimately if we don't do tolls and everybody else has them, then every time anybody from Connecticut goes anywhere, they're basically enriching the coffers of New Hampshire or whoever's tolls they go through.
Right. I mean, right now the project that's going on the I-84 bridge between Hartford and West Hartford, that's $40 million, and that's going to go through November of 2018. So welcome traffic.
Could I just mention something about our debate that I heard on one of those clips, and that is, do only hardworking families pay taxes? Do just working families? Do you have to work only? You have to be a hard worker to pay taxes in Connecticut? Because I notice they always refer to our hardworking families. I think, boy, is everybody working hard? Aren't there some people who aren't working that hard? Do they pay taxes too?
Kevin Rennie blogs at dailyructions.com. He writes a column for the Hartford Courant. Colin McEnroe, of course, is the host of the Colin McEnroe Show on WNPR. Christine Stewart, editor-in-chief of CTNewsJunkie.com. We've got to talk about whether or not we're going to get a third casino here. We're also going to talk about the impact of Aetna, at least its headquarters leaving, and how that's entered into the debate over whether or not we're still going to have a nuclear power plant in the region, at least in the state. If you want to join us, 860-275-7266. This is The Wheelhouse. This is The Wheelhouse. I'm John Dankowski. We're talking about the week's news, and boy, there's a lot of news this week with Christine Stewart, editor-in-chief at CTNewsJunkie.com, Kevin Rennie, who blogs at dailyructions.com and is also a columnist for the Hartford Courant, and our own Colin McEnroe, who hosts the Colin McEnroe Show on WNPR. What's in your show today, Colin?
Well, yesterday at the end of my show, I tried to explain what was going to happen over the next 2 days, and I got halfway through it, and I realized I didn't know what was going to happen over the next few days, particularly at the 1 p.m. slot on WNPR. But I now know today we're going to rerun our show about treason. Treason doesn't exactly mean what people think it means, and obviously it's sort of something that's, it's a word that's in the wind right now. We're going to rerun that today, and I want to mention that tomorrow, that you and I, if in fact the intelligence hearing adjourns around 1, which is kind of what they say that they're going to do, you and I will be doing a show from whatever time that is till 2 p.m., some kind of reaction and analysis show to the Comey testimony.
Am
I right about that?
That is right. That is tomorrow afternoon, whenever that ends, whenever that is. So that's tomorrow afternoon, and of course, live coverage all morning long with James Comey testifying. I will also say that next week, I'll be at the International Festival of Arts and Ideas. I like to try to do something with them each and every year, and we've got a really fantastic panel put together. Our frequent Wheelhouse friend, Danny Haar from the Hartford Courant, will be joining me, along with esteemed Nobel laureate Robert Schiller, to talk about the economy. What exactly is the economy, and some of the stories we tell ourselves about what the economy is. So that'll be our conversation. It's next Wednesday night at 5:30 at the International Festival of Arts and Ideas. You can find out more online there. So
I think Danny's also doing some experimental one-man theater down there too, as well. So.
We'll have that on the schedule.
Probably get a 2-for-1 ticket package.
If you want to join us, of course, 860-275-7266. We didn't finish up some of the things that the legislature hasn't quite finished up, Christine. So we talked about some stuff that didn't get done. Wow, it looks like now we're going to have a third casino in the state. But it got there in a sort of a circuitous way.
Yeah, so it's interesting.
It's interesting.
We started, I guess, the session off with 2 competing pieces of legislation. One that would give the tribes the exclusive right to open a casino in East Windsor to head off traffic that was going north to MGM's new casino. That's going to
look, there's a casino there. Let's just
Springfield,
stop.
Mass. Yeah,
let's just stop there instead. Okay.
And it's been touted as a jobs bill to stop jobs from to stop the tribes from having to lay off people, I guess, in southeastern Connecticut. There are casinos down there. And then we had the open bidding process. And so MGM came in and said, hey, we think that you could actually make more money as a state by creating a licensing procedure to, license off the rights to a third casino if you're going that way.
And I just want to dig into that because up until this last week, most of what has been coming from MGM, again, they're building this casino up in Springfield. They've been opposed to the state getting into a no-bid deal with the 2 current tribes to build this casino north of Hartford. They say, let's open up competition. What's really become fascinating at the state capitol is that question of, well, look, if we did this different sort of casino deal and we let, I don't know, a different company like MGM build a casino down in Fairfield County, we could make a whole lot more money. And that, for at least a bit, was attractive to some people at the state capitol who are looking for any type of revenue source at all.
Right. It was definitely attractive. But the home team ended up winning, and the tribes were able to win enough support over and convince lawmakers that, to stay with them as the known commodity. And, MGM said last night, Clinton said that, he's going to sue the state. So
there's going to be a lawsuit definitely. And before I get a reaction from Kevin, I just want to say, you mentioned earlier that mixed martial arts helped get this done. Explain to us, please.
Okay, so mixed martial arts was always really difficult to. So there's only mixed martial arts right now on the reservation at the 2 casinos, and so this basically reduces the health benefits that promoters have to give to their fighters, so that now we can bring mixed martial arts to Hartford and Bridgeport.
That's very exciting.
Good times.
Yes.
We should say there's only legal mixed martial arts at the casinos. There's illegal mixed martial arts, I'm sure, all over the place. So, Kevin, what's your reaction to this casino deal?
It's a disgrace. It's really. It's the idea that they would pick who gets to. First of all, there's no reservation land in East Windsor, Connecticut. There's no reservation land anywhere close to it. The 2 tribes have the right to their casinos because they're on reservations. There's none in East Windsor. This is a complete abuse of the state's authority, which I hope a court will rebuke them in the strongest possible way. And I noticed in the debate, the legislature even voted against letting the people of East Windsor have a referendum on this, and then they passed in the House with, I am ashamed to say, many Republican votes. I guess the only thing we can be grateful for is they didn't include cockfighting in this, because it seems like they will do anything.
That's in the implementer.
One of the other things, it wouldn't surprise me. One of the other things that I found interesting is that I live in that Senate district. I live in South Windsor, not maybe 8 or 9 miles from where the Showcase Cinema Casino, and so my state senator is Tim Larson, who has been a big advocate of this, and he spent far more time on this than helping the thousands of families that have crumbling foundations. And I don't understand how people order their priorities on this issue, that this is so important that they will neglect the people in their district.
So that may still come up as part of the budget discussion. It's not coming up as a
It may come up,
standalone at the
but
moment
I'm telling
because it
you,
has a fiscal note.
And this is support for the people who have the crumbling foundations, maybe thousands, tens of thousands of people or homeowners who could face hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of costs.
Yes.
So the state's going to do something for them, maybe.
Maybe.
Colin?
Yes. Well, crumbling foundations are sort of the prom theme for the General Assembly this year, I think, in general. But first of all, I just agree with everything that Kevin said. I guess one thing that I would say is that, people may look back at MGM strategy at all this and question it. I think part of what they were doing is assuming that the General Assembly, not incorrectly, assuming the General Assembly is like a dog with a very low attention threshold. So if you have a squirrel go running by, the squirrel, what was that? So, hey, really nice big resort complex in Fairfield County, why don't you do this? And that they would get really distracted. I think from a public policy point of view, that was unfortunate. It might have been a bad strategy for MGM, too. Ultimately, this ought to have been debated as a yes or no question. And I think it's a no for all the reasons that Kevin's talking about, that it doesn't make sense even kind of constitutionally. It doesn't make sense as public policy. It's going to be a slot shack. It's probably going to be something of an eyesore if I had to guess. And it's just not a particularly good idea. Unfortunately, it wound up being debated in kind of a triangular way, with sort of the MGM thing on one corner and this thing on another corner, and no more casinos on a very distant corner of the triangle. No more casinos was a great answer, but I think it was the one that got considered the least of the 3 possibilities.
Well, and we talked about mixed martial arts and the role in this, but actually some additional spaces for off-track betting actually ended up as a piece of this too, Christine.
Yeah, it did. So they're going to increase OTBs from 18 to 24.
So, which means more off-track betting, not more slots in other places, though, which is certainly something that was talked about, not allowing slots in other places around the state.
Well, the OTBs were kind of like, why are you going to put slots in if you're not going to give us any revenue from those slots? Why would we want the slots in there? It was a very confusing, attempt to find a solution.
They know that, for instance, you put that slot shack in East Windsor, it's going to hurt a lot of local businesses. It's going to hurt restaurants.
It's going to hurt the Windsor Locks. It's going to hurt Bobby
But
B's.
it's going to hurt restaurants. It's going to hurt other businesses where people spend their discretionary entertainment dollars. Also, I believe it's important to remember The tribes were not the least bit concerned about Connecticut jobs when they were trying very hard to get in on the Massachusetts expansion of gambling, building casinos around the state. They were very eager to be part of that, and they never said, "Oh, and we're worried about Connecticut jobs," when they were in the mix.
I just
and
have,
are still in, one of them still in the mix.
I don't want to spend too much more time on this, but I have to ask, just Christine, about that jobs equation too. The thing that I asked the tribal leaders about this when this plan was first launched. I don't quite understand the jobs equation. If you have the possibility of losing jobs at the two existing tribal casinos, but you're going to build another casino that is going to theoretically take some business away in the Hartford market from those very two tribal casinos, wouldn't it stand to reason that maybe jobs shift, but jobs aren't necessarily created, jobs aren't really maintained? You're probably still going to have less gambling down in Southeast Connecticut.
Yeah, I think the jobs numbers were a little fuzzy. I think that they were also adding, the jobs that would be created by building the casino. And and maybe some indirect jobs as a part of that. I haven't gone over those numbers in a while.
A little fuzzy, perhaps. Yeah.
I mean, ultimately, too, some of the proof of the pudding here will be in the eating. And I haven't really actually looked at plans for the slot shack or whatever we're going to call this thing on I-91. As somebody who does occasionally place a bet on a horse race, I can tell you that when you go down to Winners, the interestingly named facility down in the South Meadows, it's not anything like a casino experience, right? It's, I mean, you can argue anyway that the two casinos are a place where a couple could go for the night and, eat at Gino Ariema restaurant or, see a prize fight or something and do a little blackjack and whatever. And that it's, I mean, it is what it is. It's not something that I'm entirely in favor of, but it is what it is. But these, like a lot of the OTB places are places where people are basically just sort of pumping money into a gambling system that ultimately doesn't, for the most part, work in their favor. Most people lose money. And I'm just wondering what this thing is going to look like and whether it's going to look more like a casino or more like, an OTB place where people are just kind of partying with their money electronically.
I think it's going to look more like a casino but have less entertainment choices and less, restaurant options. It's going to be table games and it's going to be slots.
Yeah. More like a casino but less entertainment choices. Let's go to Pete in Terryville. Hey, Pete, go ahead.
Yeah, good morning, people. How are you guys? I have a
good.
comment just for politicians in general in Connecticut. I think we have to start focusing more on how to raise our tax base and try to increase the tax receipts. I don't know if any of you guys have seen the article in the Wall Street Journal over the weekend that highlighted Connecticut's decline. We've kind of hit a wall. We've created all these policies to scare businesses away, and now we're actually hitting a wall and we have decreasing revenues, which is going to be a huge problem. And we're scaring businesses away. Look, we just lost Aetna. We lost GE last year, and actually Travelers was one of the three that threatened to leave when they put all those proposals, tax increases on corporations, back in 2015. And, they could be the third one to drop that promise to leave. So I think politicians need to focus on that. It's a huge problem in Connecticut.
Well, Pete, thank you very much for the phone call. It helps us pivot a little bit to what we've been hearing about. We quoted you last week when we were talking about Aetna's move potentially out of Hartford. They've essentially said that they're going to do that. This isn't a move, Kevin, of thousands and thousands of jobs, or so the company says. It's the move of a headquarters, symbolic, they say. Not unlike GE's symbolic move, although that certainly came with a little bit of prestige. What do you see in the latest news about Aetna parting ways with Hartford?
Well, I see it as that we're living in a trend instead of just an outlier with GE, and we may see more of this. And these companies are very nimble now. It's a lot easier to move than it used to be given technology. If this weren't significant, if Aetna weren't significant, then why would the governor have offered them a blank check? Everybody knows it's to stay here. Everybody knows it's significant. And, it may start with the top executives, but then as the company grows, where they decide to grow, Hartford no longer stays at the top of the list because they're not there. And Aetna has been increasing its presence in Manhattan. For instance, the team that had a lot to do with trying to do the acquisition of Humana, I believe, was based in Manhattan. And it's a sign of things to come.
But what do we do to keep an Aetna here? They are very nimble. As we saw from GE, they often want to go to places where there's some sort of burgeoning tech sector or some brand new development that's going to attract younger workers. If you're not going to write a blank check, which I think we all say maybe the state shouldn't have done as much of over time, then what else? Governor Malloy has been saying, hey, legislature, maybe you shouldn't be considering so many anti-insurance company bills during legislative session. But what do we do to keep them?
Well, for instance, with Aetna, as a matter that went back a few years ago, Aetna didn't join the state health insurance exchange.
That was noted. Because
of the way that they were regulated, which was certainly under Dan Malloy's authority. And they, as your caller said, they laid out the map in 2015 when they signed on to a very big tax increase in 2011, which I think was not easy for them, and they expected to see major reforms. And then what happened was they came back in 2015, and there was another big tax increase, and it fell heavily on them.
Well, I mean, on the other hand, these people don't move their headquarters to low-tax areas. New York City is not a place with low taxes. Boston, where GE went, is not a place with low taxes. An awful lot of this has to do with where they want to be. Now, Aetna's plans are a little fuzzy right now, but the sense that we're being given, falsely or truly, is that an awful lot of what we recognize as Aetna will be left behind as a kind of guilty remnant. Mark Bertolini, he wants to go to New York City. And there's something almost heartrending about the two letters plus the DECD memo that went from the Malloy administration to Bertolini and went unanswered. I mean, to me, that's kind of unusual right there, that a governor would be writing to you in such a way and that you wouldn't even answer that. I mean, it sort of tells you a lot of where Malloy begins the letter kind of on a peer-to-peer basis. I think he even says, well, we both have a reputation for being kind of frank. And I'm thinking, Bertolini's thinking, but my suit costs 18 times as much as yours does. And that's where I'm going. I'm going to a place where people are as rich as I am and dress like I am and eat the kind of meals that I want to eat. I'm going to New York City. I don't belong in Hartford, which can't even keep the Comet open, or the Oasis, or whatever you want to call it, next door to this gigantic insurance headquarters. And to me, this isn't so much about our fiscal policies. If it is, I don't get it.
I think you're deluding yourself.
Why aren't they moving to some place where their tax burden is lower?
Because their future burdens are not going to be anything like what they see in Connecticut with our unfunded obligations coming down the highway at them.
Let's see what New York is going to have: paid family leave. New York has got a $15 minimum wage. So they're not worried about the minimum wage at a place like Aetna because the people they move are making many times more than the minimum wage. But what they do worry about are tax increases in Connecticut because almost no other state has the same kind of unfunded obligations that we do. New York does not have those kinds of unfunded obligations that we do. Massachusetts doesn't have those kinds of unfunded obligations. And for the people in the top income earning brackets, Connecticut's effective income tax rate is higher than it is in New York. Well, so this is a tough sell. So how do you sell this? If you're a politician in Connecticut now saying, look, we failed to pay the bill for 30 years. It's coming due. We don't want to raise your taxes, but we don't have any other way to pay for it. And if we
their chance to
cut spending, Connecticut won't look like Connecticut.
Well, I don't think Connecticut is wholly dependent on government spending. I think Connecticut looks like Connecticut even without spending all the money that it does. If that's how we define ourselves, then we've entered a socialist state.
I have to ask you, Christine, as I mentioned, I'm doing this thing with Robert Schiller next week, and one of the things he's been writing about is the narrative of economics. And the stories that we tell each other about the state of the economy actually have an awful lot to do with how the economy then functions. The question is that the state legislature right now, as they're sort of flailing about trying to fix budgetary problems and also pass other legislation, do things like Aetna moving, GE moving last year, this Dominion thing that we're going to talk about in a minute, does this have an impact on how people are doing business? Are they actually saying, we need to stop the sinking ship here?
Oh yeah, I mean it's definitely had an impact on what they're discussing and how they're discussing it and the perceptions that are out there. I think that there is no desire to increase taxes of any type because of this. So then they know that they have to look at other places to cut spending, which is also equally unpleasant and can also get make sure that you are not reelected too.
I want to bring up this Millstone bill, and it's tied in part because I saw that the folks who represent Millstone Dominion, the company that owns them, saying on Twitter the other day, look, we've seen Aetna moving, we've seen GE moving. If the state doesn't do something to help pass this bill that helps us do business here, maybe, I don't know, maybe Millstone's going to, move? I mean, Aetna can be very nimble. You can't exactly move a nuclear power plant. What's happening here?
Actually, Mr. Burns in Springfield has said that he would take that power plant.
Can move the power
Well,
plant.
I mean, Dominion as a company separate from Millstone is a very successful company and is diversified in other ways. Millstone is just one small piece of it, and they're saying basically, look, we could decommission this plant. I mean, it might take several years, but that might be the best business decision for us to make if you don't give us this help.
And are they going to get this help?
The Senate passed legislation last night, and it still needs to get through the House today.
Kevin? So, what should the state be doing to...
I'm just gonna say, before you ask a question,
Yeah.
Energy policy is very complicated. And I think that this bill is in that vein of being complicated. But they've passed similar measures before. Essentially, Dominion is saying, we don't want to be completely dependent on the short-term energy market. We'd like some long-term contracts.
But one thing that we've been seeing across the country is if a nuclear plant is going to shut down or is in trouble, in part it's because states like Connecticut and many others have really placed a bet on natural gas. I mean, natural gas has been the thing that's coming in and wiping out all sorts of other sources, renewable and on the nuclear side.
Yeah, it's true. But the thing are we prepared for that in Connecticut? First of all, they decommissioned that plant. I think they get $1 billion payment to help to defray the costs of that. It's and that's not going to fall with the rain. That's going to have to be paid by ratepayers.
Colin?
First of all, I want to double down on Kevin's statement. This is really, really complicated. I'm very comfortable saying I don't completely understand it. It also is maybe an example of something that a part-time legislature is going to have a lot of trouble understanding, too. I'm not saying that a full-time legislature would automatically understand it, but you've got an awful lot of people there who,
And admittedly, during the debate last night, they were like, we don't get this.
Right.
We don't understand this, and we're really feeling like we're being bullied into approving this.
Right. And I think they're not wrong about that. And I think this is going to have a more wobbly journey through based on what the House is saying. I feel like it's going to have a more wobbly journey there. I don't make it past.
Well, the journey ends at midnight, so.
Right. I just wonder.
The journey continues, and we're going to continue.
They seem
after
to be
this
setting
break.
the stage for maybe not.
Yeah.
Christine Stewart's editor-in-chief at ctnewsjunkie.com. Kevin Rennie writes for the Hartford Courant and also dailyructions.com. And Colin McEnroe is host of the Colin McEnroe Show. When we come back, we're going to look ahead to Comey Day on Capitol Hill coming up tomorrow. This is The Wheelhouse. I'm John Dankosky talking about the week's news with Colin McEnroe from The Colin McEnroe Show. Kevin Rennie, columnist for the Hartford Courant and his own blog, dailyructions.com. And Christine Stewart, editor-in-chief at ctnewsjunkie.com. We've been talking about what's happening at the state. A big day tomorrow on Capitol Hill with Jim Comey testifying, although I will say that maybe that news not trumped completely, but trumped a little bit by President Trump today, saying that he's revealed who his new FBI chief is going to be. Christopher Wray, this is from Donald Trump's tweet, a man of impeccable credentials to be the new director of the FBI. Details to follow, announcing this in a tweet. Wray served as Assistant Attorney General under President Bush from 2003 to 2005. When he went to work in private practice, he represented New Jersey Governor Chris Christie in the wake of the Bridgegate scandal. Christie told NorthJersey.com that he had the utmost confidence in Chris. I don't know what we know about Christopher Wray. I do know, Colin, that we're looking very much forward to Jim Comey tomorrow. What do we expect him to say?
Well, I mean, I'm going to go way out on a limb and say I think we know what he's going to say, which, given the way history has unfolded over the last 18 months is a stupid thing for me to say. But, I mean, in general, I'd be surprised if his testimony departs from basically what we understand that he is going to say from past reporting about his meetings with President Trump. It's also come out that he has now apparently talked to that in real time he talked to at least 3 people within the Justice Department, the kind of people who also keep notes. We know Comey keeps notes. Usually kind of lawyers who work in the FBI or in the Justice Department kind of take notes on conversations that they've had. I don't think there's going to be a kind of, law and order type moment where somebody breaks down and says something unexpected tomorrow. I think you're going to hear basically now as a matter of sworn testimony and public record, the story that we've been hearing the entire time, which is that Donald Trump tried to get James Comey to drop the investigation into Flynn.
So if that's the case, Kevin, what are we going to be listening for tomorrow?
Oh, I think the narrative of this is always interesting in whatever form it takes. It would be interesting to see how tough the questions are for him. The Wall Street Journal points out today that James Comey has not been very cooperative with the Senate Judiciary Committee, although he's friendly with the Senate Intelligence Committee, and he has not been handing over his memos, which is, I think he probably should, since there have been leaks about them. They certainly sound like friendly leaks, and he loves the spotlight, and he's going to have it tomorrow. So I would expect a pretty good performance out of him.
Christine?
Yeah, so Senator Blumenthal is actually on the Judiciary Committee, and so they have asked for their own hearings, and they have not been told either way. They're expected. He was hopeful earlier this week that they would be able to get hearings.
What's interesting, of course, this comes during President Trump's self-described infrastructure week, in which he was going to unveil all sorts of plans for $1 trillion worth of spending. He started that off talking about privatizing the people who run the air traffic control system. He's going to be in Cincinnati, Ohio today, talking about building new bridges and levees, etc. Trying, I suppose, to take away some of the shine from what's going to be happening on Capitol Hill tomorrow, Kevin.
Yes, he's not going to be able to restrain himself. It's not. We know that. Maybe he'll send those children of his out there to cast more aspersions at the inhuman qualities of Democrats that Eric Trump went on some sort of crazy. Oh, they was on Sean Hannity. Yeah.
Well, and I think some sort of crazy, just fill in the blank.
Yeah,
yes, Sean Hannity.
Or just ended it crazy.
I mean, I think one thing I keep coming back to about all this is anything that he talks about doing right now has to be looked at in light of the fact that his administration still isn't remotely staffed. So at the State Department level, I think 8 of the 120 senior positions are now confirmed and in place. We have no U.S. attorneys except for Deirdre Daley here in Connecticut. We have no U.S. attorneys.
These are nominated.
Yeah, these are the driving forces of law enforcement in America, and they all either resigned or were let go, and they've never been replaced. And that's like I can't even wrap my mind around that.
And another key thing I think to watch as Comey testifies tomorrow, Trump has said that he may be tweeting during this event. His tweets have actually gotten him in quite a bit of trouble. Many people wonder whether or not the press should cover so many Donald Trump tweets, if they should be covering other things. The fact of the matter is his tweets and his public statements seem to be what's holding up his quote-unquote travel ban in the courts, and we'll see what he might say tomorrow. Speaking of what we cover and what we don't cover, Colin, we have about a minute left, and I just want to ask you about something that we read, that the Hearst Company announced that it's acquired Connecticut print and digital assets of 21st Century Media newspaper. A lot of people don't know what that is exactly, but it's a big deal for Connecticut news.
Yeah, it's the New Haven newspaper. It's Connecticut Magazine. It's a couple of other smaller newspapers in Middletown and Torrington, right? And so that sort of means, I mean, Hearst is now huge. They already owned all of the other newspapers along I-95 west of New Haven, plus the Danbury paper. This is now the empire, and I think for consumers, they're already a little bit worried about an even bigger monopoly. And I think for people like me and Kevin who work for the Hartford Courant, we're thinking, we're not as big as we used to be, are we?
Colin McEnroe does still write for the Hartford Courant. He also hosts the Colin McEnroe Show. Thanks, Colin.
Thanks.
Thanks also to Kevin Rennie, who writes for the Courant and also blogs for dailyructions.com. Thank you, Kevin.
You're welcome.
And thanks to Christine Stewart, editor-in-chief of CTNewsJunkie.com. Fiercely independent. Thank you so much, Christine.
Thanks, John.
Of course, as always, thanks to Katie Tolarski, who produces our program with Kyone Wolf, our technical producer. I'm John Dankosky. Thanks for joining us.